Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is the Piracy Show. Now, on today's show, we're going to be talking about comparing Star Citizen to other games. I have definitely used other games to highlight, some of the issues that go along with player behavior and game developer behavior. There are certain things that are universal. So you can use just about any game to basically highlight where potential problems and pitfalls would be. Some things highlight the incredible lengths that players are willing to go to get an achievement, to see how far they can go as a player. Or at other times you can use those same games to highlight horrible power acquisition mechanics that you hope don't see the light of day again in any game, much less Star Citizen. You hope that you can highlight it and say this is a terrible way to do things. But what is the day in and day out of Star Citizen going to be like? And I think that there is a very good analog for how players are going to develop mentally and psychologically within a much more complete Star Citizen universe. Modern survival games, while being, obviously thematically very different, I mean, generally they happen on an island. There's zombies or there's monsters and there's other players that you have to worry about. And most of your life is, trying to build a base, figure out how to get a gun, get a car, or some other vehicle, a horse, whatever, depending on, the era or theme of the game. But the behaviors that you pick up in survival games are, I think, a very direct analog to what Star Citizen is going to be. There's a kind of a harsh reality, a harsh Darwinian reality to survival games that I think really represents what Star Citizen, what that experience is going to be like for players. It's very much going to be long periods where you're just kind of wandering around, trying to get things done, trying to collect resources, trying to survive. And then these short periods of unbelievable excitement / stark terror. Like, oh crap, am I going to get caught? Oh crap, am I going to get killed? That sort of thing. One of the fun experiences, in this game here, Scum, one of the more fun experiences is learning how to use the different cues in your environment, the auditory cues, what you can hear in your environment to know if someone's nearby. Learning how to stealth and sneak around. That can be extremely rewarding gameplay, very time consuming, but extremely rewarding, very interesting, very fun. Some people would play Scum and they say, oh, I just want to go get an AK-47 or an M16 and I just want to blast people. But other people, they take more of a long game approach. They're like, oh, hey, I want to get my archery like through the roof. And then I want to be very stealthy so I can sneak around and kill things with arrows and, hunt animals and whatnot. And I want to do this on a PvP server, and I want to try to hide out and not get caught by the other players. And that can be a very fun and very rewarding experience as well. And I think that when you kind of think of things in this way, when you look at things this way, that's where you start to see like, oh yeah, okay, now I'm starting to see the real parallels with Star Citizen. Not just like, oh, if it's cold weather, wear cold armor. If it's warm weather, wear warm armor. Don't forget to eat, don't forget to drink. But in the way that players behave, in the way that players feel immersed in their environment. And survival games do a very, very excellent job in this area. Is it something that CIG is going to keep to? I don't know. I think to a certain extent, CIG is going to try to keep to the general themes of what they're going for, but I think that CIG ultimately is going to make certain allowances and they're going to severely curtail certain ideas. Number one, I think that the idea that armor that you wear defines what environments you're suited for, I think that ultimately that is going to be dropped. And rather, as a viewer once suggested in one of my videos, and it was a brilliant suggestion, that your environmental resistances will be granted to you by your undersuit rather than the armor that you put over it. And to be perfectly honest, I fully agree with that. It should be defined by the undersuit, because I don't feel that, lacking a certain set of armor is a good idea in saying that, oh, well, then you can't go into the cold environment because your armor's not suited for that. Because when you look at a ship like a fighter or any ship that has a very small amount of storage in it, not being able to go into certain environments is not going to make, players go, oh, I want to make more interesting choices on my ships. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. You know what players are going to do? They're just going to get bigger ships with more storage. And they're, if it happens to have a couple of turrets on it, great. I'll put a couple of NPCs in it and they'll help defend me. That's how it's going to shape player behavior, because it's the easiest path to get what you want. And deep down, it's true. This, in the end, is probably going to be, the driver that kind of makes CIG go, okay, we weren't expecting this emergent player behavior, even though I would say that the writing is on the wall at this point. There's always going to be a certain interest amongst certain players within the community to be a fighter pilot. That's always going to be a thing. But I think that the inconveniences could erode at that. And right now, the inconveniences, I think, are positioned to be quite dangerous to that type of gameplay. And so I do have a little bit of concern there. And so I'm not sure that CIG, certainly when you think about what the undersuit of your armor really represents currently, I think that is going to change, and that armor is going to have much broader usefulness in the game's future. Now, you might think that another point from survival games that could kind of come into play for Star Citizen is the idea of basically open world PvP. Now, a lot of survival games where players can run their own servers, you'll often see a lot of PvE servers, and even PvP-oriented players will use them from time to time as basically a way to kind of learn the in-game crafting system, learn the most efficient paths to, obtain certain things, or to learn certain, patterns to make certain weapons or items that they need in order to build out the PvP build that they want. Or to just kind of figure out gameplay mechanics in a much more neutral and friendly environment, so that you can take it to a PvP environment and then go, okay, now I know all these things. I know all these basic things. Now I'll be that much better at trying to navigate this world. And that is certainly true. But in Star Citizen, there is one element that, a survival game, even some of the most expansive survival games, I think it doesn't really account for. And that is how broad and how large the environment is in Star Citizen. For all intents and purposes, Star Citizen is almost an unlimited environment. You're not limited to the island or, the local environment. You basically have an entire solar system to travel through, and that includes, all the dead space between planets and asteroid fields, all kinds of places to hide, all kinds of places to do missions or to collect resources. It's a very vast environment. There certainly are games that offer similarly sized environments, but, someone trying to hunt you down in the game, especially if you're not flagged for PvP or flagged as a target, that sort of thing can, be nearly impossible if you don't really have the access that you need to kind of figure out where that player is. And that, I think, is where the open world PvP thing, it's still something that I support. I do question how players are going to react to it, but ultimately I think that it's going to be a positive reaction. I think that it's not going to be as bad as many players, have made out in the past. That they feel that the game is just going to be a horror show of, pad ramming and, endless griefing. As the universe expands, as players kind of travel around in the universe, and as we gain access to more areas and more environments, I don't think it's really going to be that bad. But we'll have to wait and see how this all groups together. Certainly how many players you can fit into a instance or layer is going to, kind of shape that. But these things can be defined, in the local area around a planet, and not just so much like this entire solar system, like what we have now, has a limited population of 50 people. And those 50 people can be spread all over the solar system. In the future, those 50 people might be in your immediate environment as CIG tries to use their hardware that they have rented or leased or whatever to the optimal efficiency. They're going to try to squeeze as many players into an area as possible. So the ultimate impact of these systems is something that we really don't know yet. We're really unsure of. Now, another impact of survival game type mechanics is the difficulty with acquisition of items, acquisition of player power, basically. I'm walking around here with a spear and a knapsack, but obviously I'm trying to get into this bunker to get a gun. And, that can be very, very challenging. And certainly if I can pull that off, I am going to have a lot more player power, far more than I have with a spear. But in a survival game, when you die, you drop your items much the same way you do in, Star Citizen. This is a fact of life in SC. And this, it's viewed as a very, it's much more realistic. Of course, if you were to die in an area, well, first of all, you wouldn't come back if you were talking realism, but your items would be lootable, and that would be that. However, while it can be more realistic, that can unfortunately have some consequences. When you're taking risks in video games, as I just did, one of the unintended side effects of that is that, losing your items or the risk of losing your items in game can lead to player apathy in regards to acquiring items in the first place, in much the same way that we experience in the current game, where you can buy upgraded weapons, shields, quantum drives. It's you go, oh yeah, of course I want to upgrade these things, but then you realize these modules cost a fair chunk of change, and if you die, they're gone. Or sometimes it just requires the game being patched and they're gone. And as much as you may want to use these items, you might get to a point where you're just thinking, well, if my ship gets blown up, I've got LTI, so it doesn't really matter, but why bother acquiring these items in the first place if my ship is going to be constantly blown up or damaged? Even a server disconnect can cost you, pretty incredible amounts of money. And so this kind of can have a very negative side effect on players' perception of value of items. Like, they may start to look at their weapon setups for their character or their ship, and they might start to say, well, ultimately I do want to kind of go out with these weapons, but maybe I'm going to set up this ship with the real premium stuff and rarely use it. But day in and day out, I'm going to use this ship over here, and it's going to have a much cheaper setup because I don't want to risk losing the money, if any at all. And, that can be a very negative thing. And so I'm not arguing for item permanence, but perhaps, there's a certain amount of premium insurance we can put into the game that not only replaces, the ship, which the basic LTI insurance does if you have that on your ship, but for a premium you can pay to get your items back as well. That could be something that we see in game. because while it remains a staple of the survival game genre, it's going to be, or it's going to sound like nightmare fuel to a traditional MMO player. And, you know, the thing about survival games is that often servers are reset and we start again and we start again and we start again. And this is nothing new, you know. Oftentimes, you know, we build up a server to a certain level and we're like, you know, I kind of want to take it back to the beginning. I want to start again. And I want to do it, you know, from a different approach. And that's what kind of keeps things fresh and keeps things interesting. But when you try to mix that mechanic into an MMO, which Star Citizen is, especially a persistent one, I'm not sure it's going to be quite the hit. I think that, you know, a lot of players are going to kind of look at that and just say, you know what? I feel that there should be item insurance. You know, I don't think that everything should be returned to you for free or without cost, but for the sake of convenience, I think that ship setups and, you know, armor and weapon setups should be insurable within the game. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about going a little too far with realism. Now, in a game like this, in a game like Scum, certainly we have the auditory feedback. We can hear the zombies in the distance. We know that they're looking for us. They're aware that we're here, but they don't know exactly where we are. And this creates a feeling of tension. They can kind of hear us. We can kind of hear them. It creates a feeling of fear and immersion. And that is fantastic inclusion of realism into the game. That's outstanding. Games could do, you know, when it comes to auditory feedback in video games, it's often so underappreciated. You know, oftentimes people will talk about, you know, graphical fidelity and things like that, but auditory feedback and just being able to experience the environment, the sounds of maybe the wildlife in the area or the enemies looming over the next ridge, that could be great, you know, inclusion of what we would experience in the real world. But there are certain things that we experience in the real world that we really just don't need in video games. Like having to use the bathroom. Now, I understand why a ship or an apartment might have a bathroom in it. Otherwise, it would look weird because it's an environment that humans live in. So, of course, you would need these things. You know, I can even understand the need to, you know, clean your character, to wash them so that their interactions with others maybe aren't negatively affected. But the inclusion of having to poop or to pee doesn't need to be in a video game. It really just doesn't. We don't need it. I mean, how far are we going to go with this? Are we going to also say, oh, you have to clean the earwax out of your ears from time to time, or your hearing will degrade? Why don't we add other, you know, unfortunate social interactions from the real world into the video game, like having to explain to NPCs that, no, I don't want to bring you on my ship because the fact you use bright pink armor makes you an easy target, and so I don't need that. Or, you know, sorry, NPC, your IQ rating is too low to man one of my turrets. Or, hey, having to explain divorce to a small child. I'm sorry, Katie, it's because mommy's an alcoholic host beast who spends all of daddy's money before he can spend it on virtual spaceships. I'm joking, of course. It might be too real for some people. But the truth of it is there are certain elements of real life that just don't belong in video games. And yes, other video games like this one here, Scum, and The Sims, of course, have included this element. But why? I mean, to be perfectly honest, when I hear that this is included in a video game, I'm not thinking like, oh, the realism. They're really going all out with this. For me, I'm kind of questioning, is somebody trying to include a personal fetish in a video game? Because that's what it sounds like to me. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.